Welcome everybody. Today I'm going to complete my presentation on Narayana Iyer. It is going to be slightly shorter than the previous three, which all took about 80 minutes. Last month I promised that this final installment would be fairly brief and that I would follow it with a separate talk on a householder devotee from North India who was called Surendra Kaur. However, as usual, I ended up going on multiple tangents and detours that expanded this final Narayana Iyer talk to over an hour. I will stop at the end of this talk since there won't be time to start a new topic today. The woman on the right of the screen is Ella Mayer. I think that's how she pronounced her name, a Swiss woman who visited Bhagavan in the early 1940s. Ella wrote a book about traveling in Asia with her cat, who was called Tipus or Typus. I don't know the cat's correct pronunciation either. The account included her meetings with Bhagavan at Ramana. The two of them, Ella and the cat Tipus or Typus, are shown together at the bottom. And the top photo is of Ella sprawled out on a chair on Major Chadwick's veranda in 1941. I'm starting this month's presentation with her because she recorded the following interesting exchange that Bhagavan had with Narayana Iyer. And this is the excerpt I've put on the screen for the first slide. It says, on another day in the hall, the sub-registrar Narayana Iyer asked why he was so lucky to be at Bhagavan's feet, having done nothing of all the religious practice recommended by the books. Bhagavan said, your past is so rich of lives that in some of them you did what was necessary to bring you here. This comment doesn't come from the account of her travels with her cat. It comes from an unpublished journal that came to light about 10 years ago. It was written in French and translated by two French-speaking devotees at Ramana. And as the attribution indicates, it appeared in Saranagati Ramanashram's online newsletter. Before I continue, I want to mention that in passing that though she was a good photographer herself, she doesn't appear in any photos with Bhagavan. She did, though, take a couple of good pictures with him when he was walking in Palakottu in the late 30s or early 40s. These are the ones on the screen, and the handwriting on the top one is hers. The devotee featured in both of them is Guy Haig, an American engineer who had a hut in Palakottu. When I first saw these photos together, it struck me how happy Bhagavan was in both of them. He appears to be laughing and thoroughly enjoying their company in Palakottu. Before I get back to my main story, I want to say that Annamalai Swami told me a nice story about Guy Haig, who was one of his neighbors in Palakottu. Guy once complained to Bhagavan about the noise in Palakottu and how it was stopping him from meditating. Those were the days when hardly anyone lived there, so he must have been highly sensitive. In response, Bhagavan taught him how to make earplugs out of beeswax, and they were so good on one occasion, people nearby thought he might have had an accident because he couldn't hear the repeated knocking on his door. This was the 1930s, when the background noise was most likely birdsong and occasional visitors to the theatre. I don't think he would enjoy being there in the 2020s, when the primary incoming noise would be truck and bus horns blaring from the nearby Bangalore Road. So back now to the first slide. The comment on the screen, which I read out a few minutes ago, summarizes Narayana Iyer's attitude towards his relationship with Bhagavan. He was in a state of constant and inexplicable wonder that Bhagavan had picked him out, brought him to Ramana and showered a remarkable degree of love and affection on him. Narayana Iyer never felt that he was a mature devotee who deserved this treatment. Some of the stories I narrated in earlier episodes of the series demonstrate how Bhagavan frequently picked him out for exceptional expressions of his love and care. The story of him taking Narayana Iyer to the dining room and personally cooking a snack for him is one that stands out for me. There were a few other devotees who were treated in this way. G.V. Subramaya was apparently one. Here he is in two photos on the right. The one on the left was taken during his years with Bhagavan. The full body one, which you don't see much, probably dates from the 1960s. He passed away in 1970. I think it was Devaraja Mudalya who commented in one of his books that Subramaya seemed to get an exceptional amount of love and concern shown to him by Bhagavan, perhaps more than most other devotees. Why was this so? Perhaps a clue can be found in Bhagavan's comment that appeared on the first slide. I recapitulate. He said, "Your past is so rich of lives that in some of them you did what was necessary to bring you here." Devotees who visibly and obviously had some kind of loving and affectionate bond with Bhagavan may have earned their enviable position by having a past life connection with Bhagavan, and not merely through the devotion or maturity they displayed in their current lives. I don't know if Bhagavan remembered these past connections or whether he behaved the way he did because the past association compelled his actions in a way that even he didn't understand. Bhagavan was very tight-lipped about having knowledge of devotees' previous lives or connections with him. The one occasion I know when he let his guard down was when Annamalai Swami said that he didn't know enough about building or construction work to do a job that Bhagavan had allocated to him. In an almost throwaway remark, Bhagavan said, "You were an engineer in your past life, you'll soon pick it up." That's Annamalai Swami standing behind Bhagavan in the photo on the right. In the other photo taken during the construction of the dining room in the late 1930s, Annamalai Swami, I think, is standing on a wall with a towel around his head. And here is a photo of Bhagavan sitting on his sofa in the old hall and reading a book. I have put it here because of a statement Bhagavan once made. I can't remember where I read it, but Bhagavan apparently said, "No one gets to sit on the floor here randomly or by accident. Everyone who reaches here has earned the right to be here through something they've done in the past." If anyone can remember where that's written, I'd love to know the source. I was scratching my head over it for this talk and forgot where I'd read it. I like this idea. We have all earned our right to be in Bhagavan's presence through our endeavors in the past. We may not know what they are, but they gave us the right to associate with the jnani in this life and receive his grace and blessings. If we feel unworthy, it's simply because we have no recollection of the things we did that brought us to our present situation. Instead of feeling miserable about the state of our minds or unworthy to receive Bhagavan's grace, we should recognize that Bhagavan has somehow selected us and brought us all under his wing. And to reinforce this optimistic message, here are two statements by Bhagavan recorded by Muruganar. They appear in the Promises and Declarations section of Adamalai. "Those who have come to my feet with love and without delaying are those whose birth has been graced by God. Theirs is an eminent and true life." And the next verse says, "Like the children of an emperor, my devotees are heirs to abundant rejoicing." I would conclude from this that we are all the favored royal princes and princesses in Bhagavan's spiritual court. Since our spiritual pasts have bestowed this position on us, we have no reason to feel unworthy or feel that we're not good and deserving devotees. Having said that, I want to go back to Narayana Iyer and his feelings of unworthiness. Ganeshan has reported that this was a regular complaint whenever he met with him, and here is how one such conversation went. On many occasions, Narayana Iyer would come to the ashram office, drag me outside, and lead me to the cowshed or to the foot of the hill. He would then share his experiences with me. His refrain always was, I did not deserve such pointed tenderness from Bhagavan. Perhaps I did some good deeds in my past lives. In this life, I have neither done puja nor sadhana to deserve such special attention and love from him. Ganeshan is standing with Bhagavan on the left of this group photo, which was taken in the early 1940s on the lower slopes of Arunachala. Narayana Iyer must have remembered and been aware of Bhagavan's statement mentioned at the start of today's talks that his activity in past lives had brought him to Bhagavan, but he could never dispel his conviction that he was a totally unworthy recipient of Bhagavan's love and affection. Perhaps he was just observing that Bhagavan did seem to single him out for an unusual amount of affectionate treatment and was simply wondering, why me and not any of these other devotees who are also sitting here? It's now time to get back to the narrative of Narayana Iyer himself. For the next few slides, he will be telling his own stories again, and this is how he continued with his account. A colleague, Sri T. Viswanathan, was posted as sub-registrar of Tiruvannamalai. Although he was doing the same job that I was, I had never met him. He wrote to me about his good fortune of spending the closing period of about 6 months of his official career at this holy place, and of the much yearned for opportunity to have the darshan of Sri Bhagavan. He intimated to me that he would take up duty in about a week. In the photo on the right, Narayana Iyer is standing behind Bhagavan with his arms folded. Continues. I showed the letter to Sri Bhagavan and the subject then went out of my thoughts. About a week or so afterwards, at about 7:30 p.m., a person who looked orthodox was prostrating before Sri Bhagavan. Evidently, he had read the notice board put up by the ashram management forbidding the devotees from touching Sri Bhagavan's feet. The implication of the sign would be that visitors were not allowed to put their hands on Bhagavan's feet in the traditional gesture of respect and reverence. Viswanathan found an interesting loophole to get around this restriction, or at least one that he felt was not directly contravening the rules on the notice board. Narayana Iyer continues. This person, obviously wishing to avoid being objected to, but unwilling to forego his heart's desire, observed the letter of the rules by clasping his hands behind him, away from Sri Bhagavan, while he prostrated like a gymnast and rubbed his head over the feet of Sri Bhagavan, as a calf would do when fondled. Sri Bhagavan allowed full scope for this indulgence. Viswanathan had not introduced himself prior to doing this, but Bhagavan seemed to know exactly who he was. Narayana Iyer continues. Then he, Bhagavan, turned towards me and said, Sri T. Viswanathan. Who had told him so? The newcomer hadn't spoken a word. Perhaps Sri Bhagavan had a sixth sense to scent a devotee. Narayana Iyer now switches to an entirely different topic. He continued by writing, the reactions of Sri Bhagavan to physical pain were always a mystery to me. I asked him if it was true that he once had, as I was told by a friend, boiling rice gruel spilt over his posterior, and that Sri Bhagavan knew about it only some time after. Bhagavan accepted that the story was true and gave me the details. The incident took place in the ashram kitchen. On the right, there is a photo of Bhagavan sitting on the kitchen veranda in the late 1930s. And this was Bhagavan's subsequent explanation. I was straining the kanji, rice water, from a vessel in which rice had been boiled. I was sitting on the floor. The boiling kanji was to be collected in a smaller vessel on the floor, but I was talking to someone, and without my noticing, the kanji fell on the floor, not in the vessel. As the floor sloped towards me, it got under my posterior. I knew about it only afterwards when it got cool. Of course, I got blistered, and Zambuk, a pain ointment, was later applied. No doubt there was pain after it was noticed, but who cares? The bliss of self-realization perhaps drowns any other experience. The photo is of Bhagavan eating in the old dining room. You can tell it's the old dining room and not the new one because you can see the wooden beams in the ceiling. That last story gives me an excuse to head off on a tangent to give other examples of how Bhagavan seemed to be mostly impervious to pain. The narrator for the next few slides, which all contain stories about Bhagavan's pain threshold, is Rangan, one of his schoolboy friends. Rangan begins in the following way. On one of my visits to Skandashram, I noticed Bhagavan's leg was bleeding. He had just had a bath and he was drying his body with a towel. What is that injury? I asked with great concern. Bhagavan had not noticed it before, so he replied, I don't know. How can it be, Bhagavan, that you are not even aware that your leg is bleeding so much? I was surprised that Bhagavan could be so ignorant of such a major injury. And the photo here shows Bhagavan sitting on the front parapet wall at Skandashram, facing the town. Narayana Iyer continues, after considering all the possibilities, Bhagavan remarked, I think a coal from the incense burner must have fallen on my leg and caused a burn. I got some medicine and applied it to his leg with a new understanding of how much distance there is between Bhagavan and his body. And on the right, there's an old Skandashram picture of Bhagavan sitting next to his mother in the Skandashram courtyard. As someone who regularly walks on Arunachala with bare feet, I have to say that Rangan's next story is one that really impresses me since it deals with multiple thorns in the feet. He continues with his story by writing, this understanding was reinforced by another incident that took place on a day when Bhagavan and I were walking on the forest path around the mountain. At one point, I stepped on a thorn. When Bhagavan saw me lagging behind, he stopped, came back to where I was, and removed the thorn from my foot. A few yards later, it was Bhagavan's turn to step on a big thorn. I ran up to him, lifted his foot, and was astonished to see innumerable thorns sticking out of it. Some were old and some were new. The photo shows Bhagavan on one of his Palakatu walks, accompanied by Guy Haig, who seems to be showing up a lot in these photos. This is where the forest path used to start. It should be noted that Bhagavan never ever wore sandals when he walked around the hill. The forest trail he occasionally followed would have been littered with small thorny twigs. Rangan continues, I lifted his other foot and found it had just as many thorns embedded in it. Which thorns will you remove? Asked Bhagavan with a laugh, the old ones or the new ones? Bhagavan then crushed the protruding thorn with the same foot it was embedded in and happily walked away accompanied by me. What better proof is there that Bhagavan had nothing to do with his body? In retrospect, I think that Bhagavan intentionally let me see him behaving like this in order to make it clear that he'd ceased to identify with his body. In the photo on the right, Rangan is the man standing on the right with folded arms. In the final months of his life, when the sarcoma was eating away his arm, Bhagavan was asked whether he felt pain. He said that he felt it distantly as if it were a dream pain. Pain was there, he said, but there was no suffering. Suffering is a response to pain, a feeling, I don't like this, I want it to stop. Bhagavan never had this kind of reaction to bodily pains. Here's some conjecture. A few months ago, I read an interesting article about anesthetics. Some people are highly allergic to them, but they can be operated on, still conscious, if they are given a truly massive dose of Valium. The Valium somehow stops the brain from having negative thoughts about the pain, and by doing so, it massively reduces the brain's interpretation of pain. In that state, there is no anticipation that pain is going to be bad and that it needs to be avoided. I suspect jnanis are in a slightly similar state. They don't judge pain as being something negative or as something their mental anticipation says is going to be unpleasant, so it registers at a much smaller intensity. Now it's time to go back to Narayana Iyer's account, and this is how he continued. Sri Bhagavan did not always show the same external demeanor. Most of the time, he was a very pleasing person with a fascinating, welcome smile. However, on occasion, he could be stern and look forbidding. At such moments, people were struck with a forbidding awe. One hot Sunday afternoon, an old devotee placed before Bhagavan some palmyra fruits, nangu. Nangus are watery, lens-shaped, translucent fruits that are found inside the large nuts of palmyra trees. There is a picture of them inside the nut and after they've been prized out on the right. Narayana Iyer continues. Bhagavan severely remarked, "Why do you do this daily? You're a sannyasin. You must beg from others to get money to procure these. When you do this, you must say that they are for me. You know that I cannot eat them without others present sharing them, and so you have to get a large quantity. This you do using my name, as though I desire it." It's not easy to find photos of Bhagavan looking stern and angry, but here's one from the new dining hall. Whenever Bhagavan did get angry, it was often because food was not being distributed equally in the dining room. The photographer here might have caught Bhagavan in a moment when he spotted some inegalitarian behavior by one of the ashram's food servers. The tirade continued. Can't you keep quiet and mind your own business? You prostrate before me and think you have won me over. Every prostration is like a blow on my head. All sorts of things are done outside these four walls with impunity, as though these walls hide and protect them. Who likes these prostrations? Narayana Iyer continued. On and on he went in a tirade against all and sundry who posed as pious men, but were hiding a lot of impurity. It was not just one individual who was being attacked. The atmosphere in the hall was tense, and one by one the devotees sneaked out. But such moods were only momentary, and he could switch on to his more usual geniality the next instant. And since this is a story about Bhagavan being in the hall, here is a photo of him on his sofa with Narayana Iyer peeping out behind him. Bhagavan's ability to switch almost instantly from apparent anger to his more usual geniality is illustrated in the next story. Narayana Iyer continues. Once, for example, Sri TPR and I decided to ask Bhagavan for an explanation of the 6th stanza of our Arunachala Ashtakam. We went to the hall to ask our question after Sri Bhagavan had returned from his usual walk on the hill. In the hall, Sri Muruganar had just prostrated before Sri Bhagavan and then gone out with his usual begging round to obtain food for his lunch. That's Sri T.P. Ramachandra Iyer sitting next to Bhagavan in a photo that looks like it was taken around 1930. T.P. Ramachandra Iyer was one of the ashram's lawyers, and he also served as Bhagavan's attendant from time to time. Narayana Iyer continues. Earlier that day, we had ground up some jackfruit for a sweet dish that would be served at the midday meal. It was going to be a special meal because Muruganar had given a donation for a bhiksha to commemorate the death anniversary of his mother. Bit of explanation needed here. In this context, the bhiksha denotes a meal in the dining room that has been paid for by a particular devotee, usually to commemorate some family event. Non-residents of the ashram, such as Muruganar, who offered bhiksha in this way, would normally be invited to join all the other devotees and visitors to share the meal in the dining room. When special meals were offered, they would often include extra items that were not normally on the menu. In this case, the extra item was a jackfruit dessert. Muruganar had a particular fondness for his mother, so it is not surprising that he chose to remember her in this way. Several of Muruganar's books have verses in them praising his mother or have dedications to her. And the photo shows Muruganar sitting next to Bhagavan in the late 1940s. Time for another digression. I like this one. Muruganar loved living as a sadhu, and he particularly liked going out to beg for his food. Here are 4 of his verses spread over 2 slides that celebrate the practice. The ultimate tapas is living on begged food and doing it without the false pride, I am doing this. Those who have accomplished this should not be disregarded as degraded and undignified people. Their majesty, thriving through a dispassion that is rooted in jnana, is unattainable even for Indra, the chief of the devas. Through jnana, the authentic grace that terminates ignorance, I have been blessed with the great fortune of eating food obtained by begging in a way that elevates rather than demeans. And through the infinite Sivam nature that surges as inexhaustible wealth, both likes and dislikes became totally false. The photo shows Murugan sitting next to Bhagavan in 1923, soon after he arrived. And here are the final two verses. My Lord, who possesses the power of bestowing jnana, which shines abundantly in him, desired true knowledge to arise for me. As a result, what I attained inside was becoming the supreme ruler of the empire of the self. The great life I attained outside was living on begged food. For a sadhu, the great life of accepting and eating food as alms is the fearless and majestic life of grace. It is a life free of reproach, in which he exists as supreme bliss in the transcendental expanse, the state of peace devoid of the leaping of the insignificant mind. And that is, of course, Murugan at the bottom of the slide. Bhagavan felt the same sense of exhilaration when he went out to beg for his own food in the late 1890s. This is what he had to say about it in Day by Day with Bhagavan. Bhagavan said, you cannot conceive of the majesty and dignity I felt while so begging. The first day when I begged from Guru Kal's wife, I felt bashful about it as a result of habits of upbringing. But after that, there was absolutely no feeling of abasement. I felt like a king and more than a king. I have sometimes received stale gruel at some house and taken it without salt or any other flavoring in the open street before great pandits and other important men who used to come and prostrate themselves before me. And on the right is the oldest photo of Bhagavan, still in existence. It was taken outside Mango Tree Cave about 5 years after the events he's describing here. Bhagavan concluded his story about his begging days by saying, I then wiped my hands on my head and passed on supremely happy and in a state of mind in which even emperors were mere straw in my sight. You can't imagine it. It is because there is such a path that we find tales in history of kings giving up their thrones and taking to this path. Now back to Narayana Iyer's account, where he describes Bhagavan's reaction to the news that Chinnaswami had not invited Murugan to attend the ashram lunch that he had paid for himself in memory of his mother. Murugan went out to beg for his lunch because he had not been invited to the meal that he himself had paid for. We felt sorry that he was not going to be there to taste the special dish we'd helped to make. The fact that he was going out after giving something for a bhiksha in honor of his mother was brought to the attention of Sri Bhagavan. Instantly there was a change in Bhagavan's facial expression. He knew that Sri Murugan was not a favorite with the ashram management. Murugan is standing behind Paramaswamy, the man holding the sandals. I don't know the full history or cause of the animosity that Chinnaswamy felt towards Murugan. I suspect it may have had something to do with the fact that Murugan published his books on Bhagavan through an outside publisher, Ramana Padananda. Other devotees such as Lakshman Sharma had similar problems with Chinnaswamy and for exactly the same reason. Bhagavan remarked, who has to invite him to stay for meals? Chinnaswamy does not like him. He is the master here. So Chinnaswamy is sitting on the front row on the right side of the photo. T.P. Ramachandra Iyer, who had come to the hall with Narayana Iyer to get an explanation of the Arunachala Ashtakam verse, is sitting in the front on the left. Bhagavan rarely intervened in the day-to-day running of the ashram, such as decisions about who was or was not allowed to eat in the dining room. He left all those matters to his brother. Narayana Iyer continues with the story. There was tension in the atmosphere. TPR and I whispered to each other that we would choose some other time for our question. We closed the books we had brought with us. Sri Bhagavan saw us doing this and asked us what the matter was. We told him what we had originally planned to ask. That's TPR standing with Bhagavan in the hill in what looks like the early 1940s. Bhagavan decided to take up the matter of the commentary immediately. Instantly, Sri Bhagavan replied, "Why not now?" and started explaining the verse. It was wonderful. Every sentence started a mighty current. It didn't stop there. Wave after wave of the same exposition came to us for a day or two more whenever we sat before him. The scan of the Tamil manuscript I featured on the right needs a little explanation. The Tamil handwriting is what Munagala Venkatramaya, the compiler of Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, wrote down in his notebook. It's now talk number 323, which was recorded in January 1937. It's a long and detailed explanation of the Arunachala Ashtakam verse that Narayana Iyer and T.P. Ramachandra Iyer have been hoping that Bhagavan would explain to them. There is no indication in the book of what prompted this long commentary or who asked for it, but given its unusual length, it may be the explanation given to Narayana Iyer and T.P. Ramachandra Iyer. Remember, Narayana Iyer noted in his account that Bhagavan spoke for an unusually long time when he gave this exposition. This talk's commentary is the longest one recorded on a single Bhagavan verse anywhere in the book. I take this to be circumstantial evidence that it was given to Narayana Iyer and TPR in the aftermath of the episode in which Bhagavan expressed his annoyance that Muruganar had not been invited to lunch. Bhagavan's detailed explanation was written down in Tamil rather than English by Munagala Venkatramaya, indicating that it was delivered to Tamil-speaking devotees who didn't need an interpreter. This, for me, is further circumstantial evidence that the talk was given to Narayana Iyer and TPR, both of whom were native Tamilians who wouldn't have needed a translation. I should say that less than 10% of the talk's material that has survived was recorded in Tamil. Here is the next portion of what Munagala wrote down. At the top are the three possible protagonists in this drama. Munagala on the left, TPR in the middle, and Narayana Iyer on the right. I am going to be posting the whole of the Tamil explanation, since there may be Tamil-knowing devotees who want to go through it to see what was written in the talk's manuscript on the day that Bhagavan gave his discourse. The version on the screen has, as far as I'm aware, never been published. Those who want to go through it can read it off the screen in the YouTube versions that will appear on the Foundation's channel or my own. My own version tends to appear a couple of weeks after the Foundation's upload. The Tamil edition of talks was translated from the English edition, which is a bit odd. This means that the sections which were originally recorded in Tamil by Munagala were later translated into English prior to the publication of the first English 1950s edition, and then many years later this English text was translated back into Tamil. The published Tamil edition was prepared by Viswanatha Swami in the 1970s. He didn't use this manuscript since I don't think he was aware of its existence when he did the work. The large ledger containing these recordings was one of the many treasures I uncovered in the ashram archives long after Viswanatha Swami did his translation work. And here is the next section of the original Tamil recorded by Munagala. Munagala is on the right, and Viswanatha Swami, the translator of the Tamil edition of talks, is on the top left. As you can imagine, I was quite excited to discover that some of Bhagavan's expositions still existed in their original Tamil wording. I made a copy of all the material that had been recorded in Tamil in the talk's manuscript, about 20 pages if I remember correctly, took it to Ganeshan, who was then running the ashram, and suggested he publish these fragments in a Tamil booklet so that Tamil-knowing devotees could read something that was a lot closer to what Bhagavan actually said. Much to my surprise, Ganeshan declined, saying that The language of the text was in vernacular conversational Tamil, not the formal literary Tamil that was usually used to present Bhagavan's words. Here is the final portion of Bhagavan's explanation of the Ashtakam verse with a 1940s photo of Ganeshan and Bhagavan next to it. Ganeshan seemed to think that it was somehow disrespectful to print Bhagavan's teachings in their unprocessed colloquial form. I was of the opinion that there were many devotees who would prefer to see the original words rather than an edited and polished version of them. However, since Ganeshan headed both the publication department and the ashram itself, his view prevailed and the material I offered to him was never published. Before I continue with Narayana Iyer's account, I want to make a few observations about the recordings of Bhagavan's spoken teachings in Tamil. Even though it was, of course, Bhagavan's native language, and even though the majority of dialogues with Bhagavan were in Tamil, there are surprisingly few records of Bhagavan's verbal teachings in that language in their more or less exact and original form. This lack was, of course, exacerbated by Bhagavan's perpetual refusal to ever have his spoken teachings electronically recorded. The Tamil translators in the hall, such as Devaraja Mudalya, seen here on the top left, mostly recorded the exchanges and teachings in English, even though Bhagavan was saying them in Tamil. Munagala did record some of the conversations in the original Tamil if no translations were required, but as I said earlier, these were never published. That, by the way, is Munagala on the right, standing outside his hut in Palakottu in the 1930s. Devotees who did record and publish Bhagavan's Tamil words tended to present them in a stylized literary form. Sadhu Nathananda in Upadesha Manjari, Spiritual Instruction, and Murugana in Guru Vanchika Kove are good examples of this. Sadhu Nathananda liked long, occasionally prolix sentences that were carefully constructed in literary Tamil. Some of his sentences in his Tamil book, Ramana Darshanam, go on for 3 pages. Murugana recorded Bhagavan's statements in 4-line Tamil verses. Both books are accurate records of Bhagavan's teachings, since we know that Bhagavan read and checked them both. Spiritual Instruction has appeared in virtually every edition of the collected work since it came out. And in the case of Guru Vanchika Kove, Bhagavan went through the final text before it was published and added many edits and corrections of his own. On the right, you can see some of the changes that Bhagavan made to Guru Vanchika Kove. In the right-hand photo, he is adding a verse of his own to the text and indicating where in the sequence it should go. The new verse says, simply to inquire who is it that experiences this karma activity, this alienation, vibhakti, this separation, viyoga, and this ignorance constitutes in itself the paths of karma, bhakti, yoga, and jnana. For when upon inquiry the I ceases to be, these, karma, and so on, are known to be eternally without existence, only abiding as the self is the state of reality. My favorite editing interpolation by Bhagavan in Guru Vanchika Kove is the one that appears at the top of the slide on the left. Sadhu Nathananda, the editor of the work, had written an introduction that contained the Tamil sentence that appears inside the box. What it says in English is, it's at the top of the screen. In summary, it can be said that this is a work that has come into existence to explain in great detail and in a pristine form Sri Ramana's philosophy and its essential nature. After Bhagavan had completed his editing and corrections, he went through the introduction and made one very important insertion. You can see it on the bottom line of the Tamil sentence. The inserted syllable vai, adding to idu, meaning idu vai, results in 2 possible new meanings. The first is, out of all the available books on Sri Ramana's teachings, this work alone has come into existence to explain in great detail and in a pristine form Sri Ramana's philosophy and its essential nature. A second and slightly less extreme translation would mean this book has most definitely come into existence to explain in great detail and in a pristine form Sri Ramana's philosophy and its essential nature. Whichever reading one takes, it is a ringing endorsement by Bhagavan of this particular collection of his teachings. But as I mentioned before, these are not the words that actually came out of Bhagavan's mouth in Tamil. For some of those, we have to look elsewhere. On the screen, there is an excerpt from Annamalai Swami's diary, which he recorded in Tamil in the late 1930s and early 1940s. Annamalai Swami was not an educated man, so he couldn't reformulate what he heard Bhagavan say in a more literary way. He just wrote down what Bhagavan said. On the screen are 2 pages from his diary dated 1938, along with a picture of the cover of the original English translation of the diary. Both the original Tamil of the diary and a translation of them have been published by Annamalai Swami's Trust. I will put a link to them in my YouTube write-up. Annamalai Swami was the son of a farmer. When he was 5 years old, his father sent him to school with the following instructions. Go to school and learn how to sign your name. We are farmers. We don't need anything more than that from school. Annamalai Swami told me that it took him about 2 weeks to accomplish this, after which, as his father had ordered or threatened, he came home to help in the fields. When he arrived at Ramanaswaram in early 1929, he was more or less illiterate. He learned the basics of reading and writing at Ramanaswaram, but always struggled with the more complex forms of Tamil. Because of this educational deficiency, he didn't have the skills to modify or make more stylish the words that came out of Bhagavan's mouth. I think that was a great blessing for those of us who want to know the kind of Tamil that Bhagavan actually spoke. Venkata Subramanian, the Tamil Pandit I worked with for more than 15 years, told me that there was something pure, original, and authoritative in these unedited writings. He said that reading these lines from a barely educated construction worker gave one a real sense of how Bhagavan actually spoke. On the right, you can see Annamalai Swami standing behind Bhagavan with his, no, we can't, that's not right. Where have we gone? No. Oh yes, on the right, you can see Annamalai Swami standing behind Bhagavan with his arms folded. This photo was taken in 1938, around the time he was making the diary entry that appeared on one of the earlier slides. At the top on the left, there is a photo of him taking cow Lakshmi for a grazing walk. He told me that when fodder supplies were low in the ashram, devotees used to take it in turns to take Lakshmi out on a lead to forage in the neighborhood of the ashram. After that lengthy digression into the different ways that Bhagavan's spoken teachings were written down and processed, it's time to go back to Narayana Iyer's account. This is what he wrote next. Sri Bhagavan had his head shaved once a month on the full moon day. Natashan was the barber who used to do this service. Bhagavan sat on a stool and Natashan would stand and shave him. Once Bhagavan suggested to Natashan in all seriousness that it would be more comfortable for the barber to sit on the stool while he himself would sit on the floor. That's Natashan on the right. In his later years, he had eye problems, which is why he's wearing the dark glasses in this photo. When I arrived at Ramanaswaram in 1976, Natashan was still there. He ran a barber shop about 300 meters from the ashram entrance. Every day he would walk from there to Ramanaswaram to pay his respects to Bhagavan. I would often pass him on the road. He was quite old at this point and his hands were trembling a bit, but all the visiting male devotees I knew would, at some point, go along to his shop and get a haircut or a shave from the man who would personally shave Bhagavan for many years. A year or so ago, someone sent me this lovely photo of the Ramanashram entrance that dates from the mid-1970s. This is, if I'm remembering correctly, how it looked when I arrived. I've put it up because the old man walking towards the ashram gates with a stick in his hand looks a bit like Niteshan the barber. It may not be him, but the similarity gives me the opportunity to post this photo, which shows just how quiet and empty the area in front of Ramanashram was in those days. No traffic apart from the occasional bicycle. Back to Niteshan and Narayana Iyer's brief story about him, which I've already read out. When I put together this chapter on Narayana Iyer for the new edition of The Power of the Presence, I realized that although I had assembled more than 1,000 pages of stories about Bhagavan from a wide variety of sources and devotees, I hadn't mentioned Niteshan the barber in any of them. For the sake of completion, I decided to interpolate an account I found in the mountain path that gave details of his life and his association with Bhagavan. This is what the account said. It was published initially in the mountain path in July 1981, around the time I stopped editing the journal. I have a vague memory of editing it long ago, but I can't remember who might have written it. This is how it begins. Our Niteshan had the unique privilege of shaving Bhagavan for an uninterrupted period of 25 years. He is a native of Polur, a town 33 kilometers north of Tiruvannamalai. His father, a devotee of Lord Arunachaleshwara, the deity in the Tiruvannamalai temple, used to visit Tiruvannamalai on the first day of each Tamil month in order to do a production of Arunachala. After reaching a ripe old age, his father eventually died during one of his walks around the mountain. Sri Niteshan considers that it was the merit earned by his father which eventually earned him the privilege of serving Bhagavan. After his father's death, Niteshan was adopted by his uncle, Subbarayan. The story continues. His uncle first saw Bhagavan at Guru Merton, a period, the late 1890s, when Bhagavan had long matted hair. On seeing Sri Bhagavan, Subbarayan asked for permission to give him a shave. Bhagavan remained silent, and Subbarayan took this to be a negative answer. Later, when some of the devotees wanted to give Bhagavan a shave, Subbarayan was approached by them, and he happily accepted their invitation. From that time on, he shaved Bhagavan regularly. When he became too old to continue the work, around 1925, he advised his nephew Niteshan to continue the service. Niteshan gladly accepted the honor, and he shaved Bhagavan on the morning of each full moon day. At the bottom, there is a lovely old photo of Guru Merton, where Bhagavan stayed for about 18 months in the 1890s. It only came to light a few years ago when it was discovered in a tin box of old photos that the ashram archives had acquired. Chadwick is sitting on the steps, which means it must have been taken after 1935, the year he arrived at Ramanashram. The account continues. On the mornings when he was due to shave Bhagavan, Niteshan would first have a bath, smear vibhuti on himself, and then respectfully approach Bhagavan at exactly 9 a.m. At this time of day, Bhagavan would normally have just returned from his morning walk. On seeing Niteshan, Bhagavan would apply oil to the rheumatic swelling in his joints and then slowly walk to the cowshed. A special place was set aside in the cowshed for shaving. On the days when Bhagavan had his shave, it would be specially cleaned and then decorated with rangoli floor patterns. The photo shows Bhagavan standing in front of the cowshed. The building looks quite new in this picture, which means it was taken in the early 1930s. The story continues. Niteshan would prostrate before starting the shave and then complete the shave in silence. Only when it was completed would he say a few words to Bhagavan. On one occasion, Sri Ramana Swami, Chinnaswami, called Niteshan and asked him to start the work an hour earlier. Narayana Swami thought that in the heat of the summer, this would be more convenient for Bhagavan. Niteshan turned up at the newly appointed hour. In response to Bhagavan's questioning gaze, he narrated Narayana Swami's new plan. On the bottom right, you can see Chinnaswami and Bhagavan inspecting some building work that was being done on the new ashram dining room. Bhagavan was not in favor of the new arrangement, as is clear as the story continues. Bhagavan said that the heat was of no importance and the former timetable was restored. Natashan also used to play Nadaswaram music for weddings and other festivities. Once when he was shaving Bhagavan, his uncle Subbarayan came to see him and told him that he was required to play some music in town as soon as he had finished shaving Bhagavan. Hearing this, Bhagavan remarked, "It seems that Natashan has to go to town by 12 noon. He has not taken any food this morning." It continues, his attendants who were standing nearby took the hint and brought him some lunch from the kitchen. Barbers are normally treated as outcasts, and caste Hindus would normally only offer them food after they themselves had finished eating. Natashan was overwhelmed by this show of compassion by Bhagavan and felt that only Bhagavan could love like this. Recalling this incident in later years, Natashan was moved to tears and pointed out that Bhagavan always treated devotees equally and was particular that none went without food. The photo shows Bhagavan walking away from the cowshed where the shaving took place, followed by one of his attendants. The building on the right is the Ramanasramam Patasala. The story continues. Natashan considered his service to Bhagavan to be his highest priority and never failed to appear for the monthly shave. On one occasion, on the day before a full moon, Natashan's brother, who was living in a village nearby, fell sick and his life appeared to be in danger. Natashan explained his position to his relatives and they wisely advised him to go at once to Tiruvannamalai and do his sacred duty. Soon after concluding the shave the following day, one of his relatives appeared to inform him that his brother had died and that he was required immediately for the last rites. Bhagavan heard this information being passed on and remarked, "It seems that Natashan's brother has passed away and he has to go at once to Polor. He could not have taken his food yet, and it is not known whether he has money to travel." Hearing this, one of Bhagavan's attendants, Ramakrishna Swami, went to the kitchen and brought some food. Natashan had little appetite for food, but he took 3 cups of coffee and was given 5 rupees for his journey home. That's Ramakrishna Swami sitting on the left of the photo. Murugana is the devotee sitting between him and Bhagavan. The story continues. Once Natashan prostrated to Bhagavan when he met him walking on the hill. "Why here?" questioned Bhagavan. Natashan took this to mean that his prostration in the cowshed was a sufficient expression of devotion and that he need not do it elsewhere. Natashan always used to spend a few minutes with Bhagavan after his monthly work had been completed. In those few minutes, he would have Bhagavan's uninterrupted and undivided attention. The photo shows Bhagavan walking on the lower slopes of the hill with Yogi Ramaya, who appeared to be on duty as Bhagavan's attendant that day. And here is the final paragraph of the account. Natashan now considers these short sessions listening to the compassionate words of Bhagavan to be the happiest moments of his life. Although he is now 76, he still continues to serve devotees in the ashram, and many of them consider it a privilege to be shaved by the same hands that shaved Bhagavan. Natashan still comes to the ashram every day to pay his respects to Sri Bhagavan, and he is passing a quiet and contented old age in the proximity and the presence of the Master, whom he served and worshipped for a quarter of a century. And now back to Narayana Iyer's account of his time with Bhagavan. It was past 8:30 one night on one of my visits. Everyone had retired to rest after the night meal. I went to the office. Chinnaswami was sitting in his place talking to some ashramites. When he saw me enter, he said, "Narayana Iyer, don't go near Sri Bhagavan's couch. He is resting on the veranda near the wall. He has fractured his collarbone and a plaster has been put on it. He should not be disturbed. Prostrate at a distance and come away noiselessly." When Narayana Iyer said Chinnaswami was sitting in his place, he meant his seat in the ashram office. Here he is sitting behind his desk in a photo that was taken in the office in 1949. Narayana Iyer continues, "I was shocked to hear the news. If any other reason had been given, it might have restrained me, but the mention of a fracture made me anxious to see Sri Bhagavan. I went on tiptoe and prostrated quietly. He evidently saw me because he said, "Narayana Iyer, come and sit by my side on the couch. Sit by my side on the couch. Only then can I see you and talk. Otherwise, the bandage they have put might be disturbed and there might be pain." Bhagavan asking Narayana Iyer to come and sit by his side in the hall gives me another opportunity to show this lovely photo of the two of them sitting together in the hall with no one else there. Narayana Iyer continues, "Implicitly I obeyed when he said this, notwithstanding my fear of Chinnaswami's reaction if he should happen to see me there. He said, I was going up the steps. A dog was chasing a squirrel. I barred its way by putting my walking stick in front of it. The stick slipped and I fell down and got hurt on the collarbone. They say it is a fracture, and the native bone setter of the village, an old devotee, was sent for. He has put this bandage with some green leaves and black gram paste, and I am enjoined not to move lest it be disturbed." The photo shows Bhagavan sitting on his sofa in the old hall playing with a squirrel. Squirrels felt no fear of Bhagavan and could often be found running over his body. Bhagavan usually had a tin nearby which contained nuts that he periodically gave out to the squirrels, so it is not surprising that they congregated around him. Nor is it surprising that he made an unsuccessful attempt to protect one of them when he was out walking. The story continues. He narrated the incident as though it was someone else's body that was injured and was suffering. One day, in the last weeks of Sri Bhagavan's illness, a devout lady prostrated herself before him with her 2 children and entreated, "Bhagavan, you must not leave the body. You must continue to give us darshan." Bhagavan smiled and said, "Yes, see there." He pointed to the sculptor at work on a granite statue of the Maharshi. "They are chiseling a Bhagavan who will give you darshan always." The 2 photos on the bottom right show the statue Bhagavan was referring to when it was still at the stage of being a clay model. The finished statue, made of polished granite, now sits on a stone sofa in the new hall. Narayana Iyer continues, then he turned to the other people present and said, "Now these people have become my gurus. I have been saying, give up your dehatma buddhi, identification with the body. They now want me to cling to the body." After a pause, he continued, "You see what it means? I must not leave this body, so I can give her darshan always. To have darshan, she too must not die. And what about her children? They must always have darshan, so nobody should die." The truth was grimly portentous and told in his own unique way. On the right, you can see Bhagavan with his cancer-ridden arm sitting on his sofa in the new hall. There is a cloth covering the bandaged arm. T.P. Ramachandra Iyer, who's been mentioned a few times today, is the attendant facing the camera. V. Ganeshan recorded an incident in which Bhagavan and Narayana Iyer discussed giving up the I am the body idea. It's worth mentioning here. This is what he wrote. Sri R. Narayana Iyer, retired sub-registrar, once told me that he asked Sri Bhagavan about too much emphasis being given by Ramana devotees to the discarding of the I am the body idea, and said that this was impossible for him since he was always aware of this body and its creature comforts. Sri Bhagavan graciously remarked, yes, you cannot give up the I am the body consciousness without first being aware of it. There is nothing wrong with that. The giving up of the idea should take place by the grace of God, for by your own effort it will be very difficult. In this photo, Narayana Iyer is standing on the back row with his arms folded. The boy at the front is not Ganeshan, it's Sundaram, his brother. And now it's time for the final account, written just after Bhagavan passed away. Narayana Iyer, as to be expected, was in a state of deep shock and mourning, and it shows in his language and comments. This is how he begins. Before some stars appear, light appears. After they vanish from vision, light alone remains. That is the state of a jnani, his birth and death. These were the words of Sri Bhagavan in a talk about jnanis. The exact import of the words is as puzzling as the strange phenomena that occurred on 14th April 1950 and passed vividly before our eyes. It was about 9:15 at night. I was sitting in the open space in front of my house facing east. The sky was clear, the air still. A grave and subdued solemnity pervaded the atmosphere, as though reflecting the anxiety of so many sincere devotees of the Maharshi who had come to Tiruvannamalai on account of his illness. The scene at the bottom shows the long line of devotees who, in April 1950, were waiting to have their final darshan of Bhagavan. He carried on seeing people until the final afternoon of his life. He was in bed in what is now called the Nirvana room. Devotees could look in, pranam, and then move on. No one got more than a few seconds because there were so many people waiting in the line. Narayana Iyer now writes about the meteor that was seen by thousands of people all over India, not just in Tiruvannamalai at the moment that Bhagavan passed away. Narayana Iyer saw it in his house and somehow knew what it portended. Suddenly, a bright and luminous body arose from the southern horizon, slowly went up and descended in the north, somewhere on Arunachala Hill. It was not a meteor, as it was bigger than how Venus looks to our vision, and its movement was slow. It was so lustrous that, as it was at its zenith, the light shed by its trail stretched as far as the horizon like an arc. The sight dazzled me. Instinctively, as it were, I jumped to my feet and ran as fast as I could to the ashram 100 yards off. The photo shows Bhagavan with his doctor outside the Nirvana room in the final days of his life. The light appeared to different people in different ways. Most people saw a large star-like object moving slowly across the sky before disappearing behind the mountain. Annamalai Swami, somewhat uniquely, saw it as a slow-moving column of light. Distance was apparently no impediment to its visibility. Papaji told me that he saw it in Lucknow, North India. Narayana Iyer continues. There was a crowd of people moving about and quite a hustle and bustle. It didn't strike me to inquire of anyone what it was about. Access to the Maharshi was naturally then select and restricted to a few. I cared not for the ashram rules and regulations, but like a tethered calf let loose and running to its mother, I took a short cut, jumped into the garden, scaled the parapet, and rushed into the room where the Maharshi, Bhagavan, my Ramana, Guru, Father, God in flesh and blood, was lying. On the screen, this is the last photo that was taken of Bhagavan while he was alive. It was done by Cartier-Bresson, the famous French photographer, on the afternoon he passed away. Narayana Iyer continues, so his Leela was really over on that momentous 14th day of April 1950. No one was kept in doubt or suspense or taken by surprise. It was a prolonged ailment, and abundant opportunity was afforded to one and all from far and near to come and see him. It was one of the worst maladies that could afflict the human frame, and the way he bore it was an object lesson to all. Not once did his face reveal agony or suffering, but he carried on the normal routine with his majestic smile of supreme bliss on his face and the mirthful repartees and sallies of wit. The photo shows Bhagavan lying on his bed outside the Nirvana room sometime in his final days. Narayana Iyer continues, it was also plain that he used no mysterious yogic or superhuman powers to alleviate or conquer pain, as the following remark he made about the disease would show. Apha, an exclamation of surprise. Who could conceive that such a disease as this could be in the world? When a hiccup comes, the whole body splits like flashes of lightning in a cloud. This remark was made by him in such a cool and composed way, as though it was not his body that was suffering. This is another photo of Bhagavan and his doctor in his final days. I made some comments earlier in the presentation about how Bhagavan experienced pain. He could be unaware of his body after a severe burn and indifferent to multiple thorns sticking into the soles of his feet as he was walking around Arunachala. The pain in his final days must have been far worse for him to make comments such as these. However, as Narayana Iyer notes in his story, the I am the body feeling was not there to take ownership of the pain or react to it with aversion. He continues, when I first saw the dead body, my heart thumped, my breath choked. He was no longer in the flesh and blood. He had just breathed his last. As the star descended on the hill, he had left the body. It was held in Padmasana position by the attendants. I touched the body. There was no warmth. I clasped in a frenzied grip the hand, the mere touch of which used to give the thrill of eternity. Coldness of death agitated my nerves. All was over like a dream. Sobs, hymns, and chanting filled the air. My head reeled with dizzy thoughts. This is Bhagavan's body in front of the mother's temple shortly after he passed away. Narayana Iyer continues, we will no longer see our dear Bhagavan in that beautiful form of molten gold in which he charmed and enchanted us for decades. We will no longer see those compassionate eyes that gleamed like twin stars and peered into our innermost depths, dispelling the shadows that blurred our vision and understanding. No more that kind and godly look of grace that gave solace to our wearied souls and inspired our depressed hearts in speechless silence with unbounded peace. Or that bewitching and enchanting radiant smile which fascinated us and drew us to him and took us to heights of bliss far, far above this world. No more could we hear that sweet and ringing voice, the talks of sparkling wit and humour, or those words of profound wisdom from the depths of deep realization which intellect could not fathom. Tears gushed forth from my eyes as from a fountain. Roll, roll, you beads of love, from the fountain of love to the ocean of love. And he concludes his account with the following lines. It is not fruit and flowers, nor sweets and savory dishes that can be offered at your feet anymore. The only oblation that would reach you are tears of love from that perennial spring that is the core of our being, of which you are the source in your disembodied fullness. The divine Leela is over. And that concludes my four-part presentation of Narayana Iyer and his association with Bhagavan. I hope you all enjoyed it, but I do have a few more words to say, so I will continue. Before I end, I want to say a few words about something I didn't include in this month's presentation. Last month, in my closing remarks, I mentioned that I planned in today's talk to include the story of an extraordinary North Indian lady, Surendra Kaur, as an example of how it is not necessary to leave one's job and family in order to attain liberation. Unfortunately, as usual, I underestimated how long it would take to complete my talk on Narayana Iyer, and as usual, I got sidetracked on major detours and used up almost all of my time on completing the series. That, by the way, is a photo of Surendra Kaur on the right. I recorded the talk on Surendra Kaur a while back, and I uploaded it to my YouTube channel a few days ago. If anyone wants to watch it, you can find it there. Thank you all again for listening.
Could I ask, are any of the family still alive or living close to Arunachala?
This is Narayana Iyer's family?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so when I first came here, I think there was a nephew. Narayana Iyer disappeared off to Chennai to be looked after by his family in the late 1960s, so I never met him. I think at some point the family decided they didn't want to live in the house anymore, and it was put up for rent. When I first came, it was one of the 2 or 3 very basic houses that you could go and rent a room in for the majestic sum of 30 rupees a month. You could have a room in Narayana Iyer's house, and it was looked after by, what was he called? Radu. I think he was Narayana Iyer's nephew. I never saw anybody else from the family come. There was just this nephew who used to manage the compound and collect the rents from anyone. But when I started this research on Narayana Iyer, this is a long time ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I reached out, found some of his relatives who were still in Chennai, and they sent me various photos which have been up on the screen in some of the earlier talks. For example, the shots of his garden, his cow sitting with his wife on the deck chair in the garden. All of these things came from one of his relatives. He also sent me a photo of a notebook that he'd copied out, Oladu Napadu, in incredibly neat Tamil handwriting, just like Bhagavan's. So I got a little treasure trove of pictures from the domestic life of him in the compound. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone, apart from this nephew, in Tiruvannamalai, or at least not to my knowledge. I think the next generation, as is often the case, lost interest and stopped coming, and the house was just turned into a rental option for people arriving who wanted to stay for a month or two.
There is a question, David. Read it. Can I read it to you?
Okay.
Fine. This is GVK 534. I think he must be quoting it. Let highly mature and courageous aspirants who have a bright and sharp intellect firmly accept that soul, jiva, is only one eka, and thereby be established deep in the heart by inquiring, who am I, that one jiva. It is only to suit immature minds that scriptures generally say that souls, jivas, are many. So then I think this is the question. Ramana taste was that of Ajata. In our meetings we are talking about events sometimes 100 years ago and about seemingly other jivas. Sadhu Om advice is not to fall lower than the Drishti Srishti view, but that means simultaneous creation of Ishvara Jiva word. This again points to the lack of space and time. So where is the liberation of Ramana, but in this precise moment which cannot be found? Ramana teachings we talk about that are nothing but a dream of an elephant. So what is happening now with all of us, with you, David, being together and being advised to accept Eka Jiva Vada?
Well, I would follow Bhagavan's advice in the verse. If you have the clear, proper understanding, so what the questioner wrote in that verse is entirely correct. I have no objection to anything that's written there. You have to accept in Drishti Shrishti that what is seen and perceived and understood is all an outgrowth of the original rising of that jiva, and that when that jiva subsides, all of the things it brought into existence also disappear. So when it definitively perishes in its source, in the heart, then you can say directly and from your own experience, no creation ever happened, nothing ever came into existence. But until that moment happens, then I think you have to accept as a contingent way of living in the world, dealing with the world, that there is an I who brought into existence all the things that you see. Bhagavan said that although this wasn't, strictly speaking, Paramartha, the final truth, he said it was the most useful standpoint, the most useful perspective for devotees to have, because if you start with the conviction that what you see in front of yourself is your own creation, and that as such it has no ultimate reality, then you will find your mind is less interested in running after it. So it's a pragmatic standpoint of recognize that what you see is essentially an outgrowth of your own ego, your own vasanas. Find out what that ego is, go back to the place where the vasanas and the ego subside and vanish, and then you will know the truth. So yes, don't think lower than Drishti Shrishti, I agree with that, but in that Drishti Shrishti, understand or have the correct attitude that what you see in front of you is essentially something that your I thought and your vasanas have conjured into existence. Recognize that it's not real, it's not permanent, it's not true. Trace the I back to its source, let it perish there, and the vasanas which cause this idea of separate creation will cease there as well.
Thank you, David.
David, could you just touch on the emotions that Bhagavan showed? I mean, you mentioned the story about him being disturbed by the food, just kind of reading into the motives of when someone brought food one time, and it just kind of gave me a little hope for the fact that even though we may be grounded in the foundation of this teaching, when we're in the world, there's so much we're reacting to ego, and our ego is reacting. Of course, Ramana didn't have the ego. So, but if you could just touch on that, because it was almost encouraging.
I don't want to discourage you, but I would say that whatever Bhagavan appears to react is essentially a reflection of your input. It's like throwing a rubber ball against the wall and having it bounce back. There isn't somebody in the wall who catches it and decides what to do with it and then tosses it in a particular direction. I think if you have a mind and you go into the presence of a jnani, then that field, that sanity, acts as a giant mirror, as a giant reflector. It reflects back to you what you want, what you need. And if you come there with certain kinds of thoughts, what you get back bouncing off that mirror is something that you've put in a sense. It's your input into that mirror, and it comes back reflected from that mirror. I don't think Bhagavan has any original input of his own. I think that there's a threefold division of how jnanis sort of function in the world, or how ordinary people operate through the interaction of their own thoughts, the thoughts of other people, and natural events. There's this threefold division. In the jnani, their own thoughts have gone, so what's left are just the natural events of the world and the thoughts of the people around them. So people come into the presence in certain circumstances with certain thoughts, and then Bhagavan spontaneously reacts to them. It might manifest as laughing, it might manifest as anger, but I don't think there's a person in there called Bhagavan who is having an emotional reaction that isn't separate from the emotional input that's coming from the devotee. There's a story, I think probably everybody knows it. Everybody was sitting quietly in the hall, pin drop silence, and Amale Swami walked in, and immediately Bhagavan started talking building work. And I don't know how someone had the gall to complain to Bhagavan about this, but someone said, Bhagavan, can't you keep quiet? We're all sitting here in perfect silence. Why are you disturbing us? And Bhagavan said, I can't help it. This man just walked into the room with a head full of thoughts about building. They somehow bounced off me, and I have to start talking about buildings. I don't have a choice in this matter. I have to open my mouth and start talking about building, because this man has just walked in with a head full of building thoughts. That's all there is. It's not my choice. So this is how it is. Whatever your predominant, overwhelming thoughts are when you go and sit in the presence, that's what comes back in your direction.
In some way, it must come back in a purified form, because it's what you get is what you need, as it were.
Exactly. Yeah. I think Bhagavan was, to a lot of observers in the hall, not a very rational person, because nobody could see why he was saying things and responding the way he did, because the people in the hall could only see the polite behavior of the people sitting there asking questions. Bhagavan could see what was really going on inside them, and that's what he was reacting to. He said once, before people even come up to me and prostrate to me, I know exactly the reason they've come, and I know what they're going to ask. That there's a kind of a little charade of people coming up and being pure and holy and prostrating and asking their questions. And Bhagavan said, I always know what people have come for. I know what their motives are. I know what they want from me. And that's what I react to. So that's not apparent to everybody else in the hall, but Bhagavan, just being the pure reflector that he actually was reflecting back all of these inner feelings, all of these inner desires, rather than responding to the question which might have come out of the mouths of the person who was standing in front of him. So that there, you think, why did he say that? Why did he react that way? And it's simply because something in that person's mind compelled that particular reaction.
There's a comment in the chat. Is it possible this appearance is necessary for the life force itself to expedite natural selection?
Sorry, Sadhasiva, are you implying Darwinian or selection of pure devotees for higher things? What's the natural selection referred to?
No, Sadashiva, it's Sadashiva's comment.
Right, so some clarification if possible.
Sadashiva?
Yes, I'm here. I'm talking about on Earth itself and the appearance that that life, humanity, and the entire appearance. Is it possible that the whole charade happens for the self to decide what it wants to keep or experience as important? I hope you understand the question.
Possibly. I don't think the self ultimately has any motives. I don't think you can say this is the reason for creation. This is the reason for the entire apparent history of evolution. Consciousness unfolds, manifests in the way it is, but I don't think you can attribute causes to it. I think all the various branches of Advaita I know about are quite insistent that there's no causal agency involved. There's no relationship between Brahman and the universe, a causal one, and there's no motives involved. And Bhagavan himself says that even Ishvara that has no motives whatsoever. He's just the sun, he just shines on us. And those who are ready to have the rays turn our buds into flowers, that's what happened. It's not the fault of God, it's not the fault of the power if these things don't happen. It's the conjunction of the power of the self and the readiness of the recipient.
I see. Thank you.
Milan Vasilev, yeah, I
Yes.
just read. It wasn't a question, so I didn't respond to it. It's just a portion from the book about the nature of the self-reflecting.
Yes, and they claim that this is Bhagavan talking on English in this case about the idea that the creation is a mirror about creator in order to contemplate itself, which is very strange. This is Shaiva idea.
I think Bhagavan spoke to people according to their philosophical background, and if that's a perspective that he thought they had, then he would quite often answer that way. So he wasn't always giving definitive top of the range replies, if you like. If you yourself subscribe to a particular belief and ask the question about creation, as often as not, he'd give you an answer from within that tradition. And so Dr. Syed was a Muslim, but he also had a sideline in Hinduism. He had a copy of the Bhagavad Gita in his shirt pocket that carried around his whole life. So he was a bit of a mixture of Sufi Islam and devotion to Krishna via the Bhagavad Gita. So he was a bit of an odd mix.
But isn't it strange that 75 years after the Paranirvana, we are again here? Each of us is the Ekajiva, and the game is not over. We are again and again here.
If you're going to talk Ekajiva, then you're not allowed to say the word we.
That's the point.
You're only allowed, as that Guru Vanchika Kovai verse stated, you have to understand with your keen intellect, as it says, that there is only Eka, there is only one. There's one Jiva. That one Jiva results in everything that you see, think, believe, perceive. And if you get rid of that one, that Eka Jiva, then there's nothing. So you can't incorporate other people into these theories. If you're upholding the Eka Jiva convention, then you have to say, I am responsible for what I see. And when I cease to exist as a perceiver, then there is nothing out there that's seen. There is no world. There is no mind. So that's what Bhagavan is recommending in that verse. He said, you use your understanding, use your proper intellect to properly accept and be convinced that what arises is your own creation, it's your own invention, it's your own projection. The way to get out of all that drama, all that samsara, is to eradicate the one who projects, the one who sees, the one who registers. And Bhagavan is saying, do that, and all of your questions cease and all of creation ceases. He said that's the exit door. You know where it is, use it.
So you, David, your personal test, if you are in that, is that you are talking in your dream to your imagination now, and it has to be mind to, if we are brave enough, are we saying that, but we are talking together now, and this is the strangest part, that there is communication in that.
You are talking to your dream characters.
Yeah.
Having a conversation. This is what Bhagavan is saying, that don't imagine that there are people out there, all of whom have an ekajiva, all of whom are looking at independent universes. You've made them all, you can unmake them all. That's what Bhagavan is saying. Don't assume multiplicity. There is only the self. If you want to talk about jivas, the correct understanding is there's one. There's ekajiva. It brought what you see into existence, and when that one jiva is taken back to its source, and when it's eradicated, there are no jivas. There's just self.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. That helped very much.
Milen, you had put something else in the chat. Have you more or less completed everything, or is there still something that you've left in the chat there?
No, it was this quote. Of course, in the face-to-face, we have another one when Bhagavan is talking about Shakespeare and says, so you have also the Upanishads in English, and what incredible. After a few hundred years, we are together enjoying of this. So we have all these strange things which people recorded, and we cannot be sure that it was recorded properly, of course. But it's so strange to be together after 100 years and to talk about, to believe that somebody was free there. But Bhagavan says, if we are brave enough, we have to admit that this is happening now only in our imagination. So I'm creating David, David is creating me, but we are talking, and I have to catch that it's only me. There is only Bhagavan, and there is no space and time between us. It's happening even not now. So I just wanted to assure that at least intellectually I'm catching the spirit of this verse in Guru Vachka Kovai. Because if you have to be brave enough, and obviously I'm not brave enough, so that's why I'm asking. Thank you, David.